From the Dominion Post in Morgantown, West Virginia, this is the Postcast, the audio companion to the Dominion Post newspaper. In this episode, we hear about the future of the Hotel Morgan. Monongalia County's Board of Education sets the academic calendar for next year, and we go off the beaten path for some less traditional regional hunting. I'm your host, Chris Schultz, and these are the week's top stories. Situated at the end of High Street, the Hotel Morgan has been a staple of the downtown scene since it opened in 1925. Over the years, the hotel has played host to presidents and first ladies, and now, as it turns 95 years old, the hotel will enter a new chapter with new ownership and soon, a new look. I'm joined now by the Dominion Post business editor, Suzanne Elliott. Suzanne, thanks you so much for being here with me.
No problem, Chris.
Now, Suzanne, the Hotel Morgan is officially under new ownership.
Correct.
What can you tell me about these new owners?
The new owners are the Thrash Group out of Hattiesburg, Mississippi. It's a family-owned operation run by Ike Thrash and his two sons. They sort of go for mid-level development projects and have projects all over the country. Thrash is particularly excited about Morgantown because it's a college town, and they are big into redevelopment. The state offered them some redevelopment credits to come in and renovate the hotel. That was really kind of the icing on the cake.
Now, I know that the sale of the building was originally announced back in July. That was over 6 months ago. Can you tell me a little bit about that process of the sale, which included a public auction for a lot of the assets in the building itself?
Well, there's an old saying, the wheels of bureaucracy move slow. Ike Thrash told me that he was talking to the previous owners for 2 years. They finally came to an agreement. He acquired the property for $2.5 million. He just said these deals take a lot of time.
Now, speaking of the investment into the building, you mentioned the $2.5 million. I know that you discussed in your story, which is live on DominionPost.com right now, that they are expecting to do and currently working on some pretty substantial renovations to the building. What can you tell me about those renovations?
Thrash told me that they're spending at least 5 times what they paid for the building in renovations, which again is helped along by the tax credits. It's still going to maintain its stately look, lots of wood throughout. Obviously new wood, but it's not gonna change the character of what the Hotel Morgan is. He's gonna have a coffee shop and like a little fresh food place on the first floor. There's gonna be a restaurant on the 8th floor, the top floor. I don't know what kind yet, but he indicated that it'd be a higher end restaurant, and they will have an outdoor bar as well off the 8th floor.
Well, that's certainly exciting. Before we move on, I'm just curious to know, because I've heard people discussing it. People really love the ballroom at the Hotel Morgan. Is there anything planned for that particular space?
There is nothing planned, but like the entire building, they're going to give the ballroom a facelift, something we can all use at times, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. That's really great to hear. I'm excited to see the changes. When can we expect to see that? When will the doors reopen?
Well, if all the stars align properly, Thrash said, and he said, ideally, I would like to have it done by the end of the year.
Fantastic. So hopefully near the end of 2020, we'll see the doors of the Hotel Morgan reopen. Now, before you go, Suzanne, I just really quickly wanted to shift to another building project here in Morgantown that has caught people's attention, and that's the addition of another Chick-fil-A to the community. What can you tell me about this new Chick-fil-A?
It's going to be Morgantown's 5th Chick-fil-A, and it's going to be built off the University Town Center exit in Granville next to Wendy's. It's going to be like a regular-sized Chick-fil-A, 5,000 square feet, and it'll employ 75 people, mostly part-time. And it should be open sometime in the spring.
Now, speaking of a Chick-fil-A opening, something that you mentioned in your write-up about this new location is the tradition of the Chick-fil-A opening. It's a little unique. What can you tell me about that?
Well, it's kind of like getting tickets to a rock concert. The first 100 people through the Chick-fil-A door get free Chick-fil-A for a year. So that has led to campouts in store parking lots. People really want to be the first in line to get that Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like quite the benefit to get. Well, Suzanne, I look forward to reading your coverage of the opening and all the campouts, and obviously the opening of the Hotel Morgan as well later this year. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Chris.
On Wednesday, the Dominion Post reported that the Monongalia Board of Education had approved the academic calendar for next year, pending the passage of a bill in Charleston that could upend all of that careful planning. I'm joined now in studio by Dominion Post reporter Jim Bissett. Jim, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Chris, thank you.
Jim, I brought you in here to discuss a Board of Education meeting, which is usually not a terribly dramatic affair. But this Tuesday had a little bit of a drama due to the schedule, the calendar of schools for next year. What can you tell me? First of all, let's start with the calendar. What is the calendar for next year?
Yeah, you had a little bit of drama related to that. Right now, the school board has set August 20th for the first day of school in Monongalia County, May 28th being the last day of school for the coming year in Mon County.
All right. See, now that's very straightforward, and that wouldn't be a very good segment here for you all to listen to at home. So let's move on to what little drama we have here, which is coming out of Charleston. What exactly was the hitch in this plan?
Well, if you look at those dates, August 20th through May 28th, that comes out to something like 193 days. The West Virginia school calendar mandates for 180 days of instruction. So you've got those other days factored in for school breaks and snow days, which are always a possibility. We have a mild winter this year, but you don't know what's going to happen next year. So you got to factor in that time so you get your 180 days. At the time, the possibility of the passage of House Bill 2433, which was the House of Delegates was going to vote on, that would call for school to start no later than September 1st and end no later than June 7th. And that's kind of a narrow window because you still have your mandated 180 days in there.
Right. Now, there was an interesting opposing factor in Charleston to the passage of this bill. What can you tell me about who was opposing the bill?
You had the National Rifle Association actually came out with a couple of statements saying, hey, we don't want to do this because it's going to cut into break times, around Thanksgiving and deer season. The NRA is saying, hey, that's going to rob kids who come from families where hunting is a tradition. That's going to take away from them. They're not going to get to experience that.
So interesting bedfellows there. Now, I think we've built the suspense about as much as we can on this story, Jim. Let's give the people their resolution. On Wednesday, the House voted on this bill.
This bill was around, a version of this bill was around last year. Also around during last year's session. I don't think it made it out of committee then. This year, it went to the full House vote, and it failed 50-47.
Okay, so the power to set educational calendars remains in the hands of the individual counties.
Yeah, and that's pretty significant because I know School Board President Ron Lytle was saying, hey, everybody from Charleston, they're talking about local control, stressing these school boards should have local control, and yet this would be one more layer of control. The bill also had a provision where a school board could file for a waiver, to say, no, we don't want to start on that particular day. The county superintendent, Eddie Campbell Jr., said, well, all that means is you're going to have 53 out of West Virginia's counties filing for waivers because it's only Wyoming County starts in September, and there's another county that it escapes me right now that starts.
Might it be our neighbors in Wetzel?
Maybe Wetzel. That I think you are exactly right. But out of that's 53 out of 55. So Dr. Campbell was saying, well, there you go. You're going to have 53 waivers filed, which again is one more level of bureaucracy, more pages to go with the flipping in the calendar pages.
Well, very little bit of drama this week at the Board of Education meeting. Jim, thanks so much for bringing us this story as well as the very necessary update since you published this on Tuesday.
Hey, Chris, thank you so much for having me.
Finally this week, when most people think about hunting in West Virginia, it conjures up images of 10-point bucks, bears, and maybe a few turkeys. But recently, one of the Dominion Post's sports reporters has been exploring some other types of hunting in the Mountain State. I'm joined now in studio by Dominion Post sports reporter Andrew Spellman. Andrew, thank you so much for being here with me.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So, Andrew, just real quick before we get into the meat and potatoes of the story here, you actually have been writing more for the paper recently on outdoorsmanship and hunting in particular. Is that correct?
Correct.
And what attracted you to that topic?
Just that since our split from Metro News, there was kind of a hole to fill. I've been a lifelong hunter, fisherman, so, just trying to fill that hole.
And obviously it's something that our readership and more broadly the people of West Virginia are interested in.
Mm-hmm.
But that brings me to your story about duck hunting. Very interesting stuff, not least because West Virginia is not known for duck hunting.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, how did you even find a duck hunter in West Virginia?
Well, I grew up with them. So it was pretty easy to find that. But I didn't know he was a duck hunter until he actually posted on Instagram him with a duck he had killed.
Tell me about duck hunting in West Virginia. Obviously, this is not an area known for its wetlands, very mountainous.
Yep.
Where does someone go to duck hunt in West Virginia?
Well, you kind of hit it on the head that it's not popular here, obviously, because of that terrain problem. I wouldn't say problem, but the terrain we have here. Typically, people will go to the major waterways. Lakes sometimes, even though they're man-made, not like a whole lot of wetlands around them, but mostly the major rivers, the Ohio, Monongahela, Potomac. I don't know about the Potomac, but the Monongahela and the Ohio are pretty popular for people. The problem is there's just not a lot of duck hunters here, so it's hard to, gauge.
Now, something that has always surprised me about hunting, and the more I learn about it, is the role that hunters play in conservation. And that to someone like myself who is not a hunter, who doesn't come from a hunting heritage, it seems counterintuitive that hunters would play such an important role in the conservation of not only the obvious, such as maintaining animal populations to a manageable level, but also habitats. Can you tell us a little bit more about that problem with duck hunting and maybe the reason that we're not seeing a surge in this particular type of hunting?
Well, with West Virginia, first off, the moneymakers are deer, bear, and turkey, like most Appalachian states, I would say.
And when you say the moneymakers, how are you making money off of deer and bear hunting?
So you sell licenses and then tags with those licenses. There's ways for people to lump it together, but mostly that's where the money comes from, is the tags. So when the DNR sees that people are buying more deer and bear tags, they're going to be more prompted to spend money on rehabilitating deer and bear habitat on public lands. With duck hunting, and just waterfowl hunting in general, I should say, there's no waterfowl tag for the state. All you have to do is fill out the HIP survey and have it on you, physically or digitally, and have a federal stamp, and you're good to hunt waterfowl in the state. So it's hard for the DNR to gauge how many people are hunting. Yeah, so there's really no way for the DNR to gauge that, which then in turn doesn't give them that opportunity to say, okay, well, this many people bought duck stamps. Therefore, obviously there's more of an interest in it now with the decreasing deer populations. So we should spend money on, the wetlands along the Ohio River or the Monongahela or the Potomac or the Kanawha. So it's kind of this weird situation where they see ducks are being killed, but they don't know how many people are actually interested in it.
For someone who is interested in duck hunting, or for someone who is a hunter of those other game that we discussed, what would be the appeal of maybe exploring duck hunting? Why would someone want to shift to this particular sport?
Well, I think people are obviously hunting more big game because that's what they grew up with and that's what they know. The appeal here is it's a lot more fun, in my opinion. Obviously, it's going to be subjective when you talk to someone about it. I think it's a lot more fun. There is a higher startup cost to waterfowl hunting than say deer hunting, but there's more longevity to it. So, there's 6 birds flying at once, 5 birds flying in at once, as opposed to waiting on one deer to walk in. You only have a couple of tags to fill with deer, but you can limit out with ducks pretty quick and then go back out the next day and do it. There's certain limits put in place for certain species of ducks, but really when it comes down to it, they're not in as much danger to being over capacity than deer are. Less people are killing does. There's a higher capacity of deer now, which it's cyclical, but it's hard to snap people off certain things. So I would say that's the interest. It's just that it's more fun.
As we said at the beginning, you are working more hunting stories into your regular reporting.
Yeah.
You have a project that you're working on in regards to grouse hunting.
Mm-hmm.
What can you tell us about that right now?
Right now, not a whole lot because it's so spread out. It's so complex that it's hard to put it into just one story and then be done with it.
Well, let's start with the basics here. What exactly is a grouse?
Okay, a grouse is basically their nickname, I think, is a good way to describe them. They're called forest chickens or wood chickens. They are smaller birds, I would say medium-sized, that like to rummage around on the forest floors, and obviously they go up in the trees too, but their biggest food source is down low. They're beautiful birds, I think. I wouldn't want to be face-to-face with one if it was angry, but I think they're beautiful birds.
Okay, well, we look forward to hearing more about grouse hunting from you and obviously all the other outdoorsman pieces that you have in the works for us. Andrew, thank you so much for being here with me.
No problem. Thank you.
That's all for this week's episode. Links to all the stories we discuss are also in the description of this episode on your podcasting app. We want to hear from you. If you want to get into contact with me, you can email podcast@dominionpost.com, or you can reach out on any of the Dominion Post's social media. We are at Dominion Post WV on Twitter, at Dominion Post _WV on Instagram, and on Facebook you can find us at facebook.com/Dominion Post WV. You can also tweet directly at me at Schultz Reports. That's SCHULZ. Make sure you don't miss an episode of the Postcast by subscribing on your preferred podcasting platform. We would also really appreciate it if you took the time to rate and review the show. Be sure to check out our sports podcast, Best of 7, as well as our history podcast, All About History. That's AULL, About History. Thank you so much for listening. See you back here next week.